for another edition of What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. I am your host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Thank everybody right away for coming on tonight. It is always appreciated, and for those who will be watching this later, I appreciate you watching it. As long as you watch it, I'm happy. It doesn't take much to make me happy. Before we start tonight's show, there's always the housekeeping where I give my disclaimers out. Um, the views and opinions expressed by your humble host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot, are the Naked Bigfoot, that is me. His own. I am not here to change your mind, to alter your perception. I am not here to remove your religious beliefs from your body. Um, this show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Now, if you happen to leave from, after watching one of my shows, you feel an intense curiosity to go forth and safely discover more of the more fascinating things in our world, I encourage you to do so. And I feel like that my purpose has been achieved. Just always, if you go out, as you will probably hear and see future and on previous episodes of What the Fuck Paranormal Chat, um, I did not always explore the paranormal trappings of and workings here in the United States and around me safely at times. So most of the times it was like Jason Voorhees meets Scooby Doo. So it was rather scary. I do not encourage anyone to be like me and go out and take bullshit risks for the sake of information and to discovering the truth. But I do want you to take risks, safe risks, to go out and discover the truth of this wonderfully weird, ethereal, astral, paranormal world that we live in. Also, tonight if you have any small children in the room, and you do not wish them to hear vulgarity spoken out loud, I will be saying, on occasion, not gratuitously, foul words, bad language like fuck, shit, damn, cock, you name it. It'll pop out of my mouth in the course of the chat tonight. I do not apologize for it. It's just the way my manner of speaking. But if you don't want to have your child learn any new and fun curse words, then or be exposed to some of the verbal imagery that I will be weaving tonight, please have them leave the room or watch this episode when they're at school or not at home. Or if you're offended by such things, this may not be the chat for you. Okay. Oh, one more bit of business before we start tonight. I see that Super Horror Show is on tonight. I need to apologize to Super Horror Show and perhaps his wife, who I believe it was her birthday. So happy belated birthday to Mrs. Super Horror Show. Um, I have had a evil streak a fun evil streak in me all day. So when I saw something that Super Horror Show had posted, and of course I commented on it, and and I used some of my outdated sexist language, which I still find amusing and crack myself up doing. It was fun, but I am sorry if I offended, because I do like you guys a great deal. But I will probably do it again, so just the way I am. That is true. Okay, I'm having another one of those moments where I'm getting off subject because again I'm so full of shit and vinegar tonight that I will have fits of laughter and giggling at different times when I'm talking tonight, so I apologize early. Okay, now you're in trouble. shit. I can't help it. I like using words like toots, um, tits, chicks, chickadees, um, broads. I grew up around that language, so it became part of my vernacular. And one of my favorite sayings is telling someone not to go tits up over something. I always find a way to be able to use that phrase. So sorry, don't go tits up. Oh God. Yeah, you're gonna have to explain what you did now. That's gonna suck ass. It's gonna suck a lot of ass. Okay, tonight, as you well know, I do enjoy talking about the paranormal happenings and the preternatural happenings that happen not only in Virginia and the mountains, but also in the South, which is of course everybody knows who lives down in the South. It is the haunted South, which I have discovered. A lot of people know from my previous videos, and those who do not know are watching me for the very first time. There was a point in my life that I spent almost a decade traveling the United States, on and off throughout the United States, hitting pretty much every state in the Union, including Alaska and Hawaii. Um, not only seeking myself and seeking my spiritual self, but also investigating the strange and the unusual things that the United States had to offer. And I found that there were by far a lot more weird, strange, utterly frightening shit that happened in the South. I'm talking about south of the Mason-Dixon line, for those who need me to break it down like that, um, than any other state, other grouping of states in the United States. And that includes, you know, even, well, Texas is part of the South. I don't care what people say, Texas is part of the South. Um, there's a lot of haunted shit that happens out there and still happens there. But there's a lot of weird shit that happens in the South. There's a lot of it that has found its way into the mainstream mindset, especially when it comes to urban legends, which is going to be the focus of tonight's chat, is urban legends. What's an urban legend? Well, there are two types of urban legends in my experience. There are the urban legends that deal with the paranormal and supernatural, and then there are, because everybody knows what a fucking urban legend is, that deal with the paranormal and the supernatural. And then there are the urban legends that deal with shit like serial killers and some and the babysitter alone in the house with the man in the house that is making all these threatening calls, and they find out that the killer is actually in the house. That kind of urban legend shit. So, but tonight I'm not going to be talking about that, because I'm not going to be talking about urban legends that are incredibly well known. I'm going to be talking about three in particular that hopefully not everybody's heard about. If you have heard about it, that's pretty damn cool. But if you haven't heard about it, I hope this is going to be the first time. And while I was traveling, I really enjoyed gathering people's stories and their tales, especially urban legends, stuff that everybody knows the base story, and they believe that it's true because it happened to a friend's friend or a friend's friend or something like that. And that's how urban legends are passed along. Whenever you're talking to somebody about the urban legends of their town or community, they know it's true. It's a fact because their cousin's uncle's brother experienced it or saw it themselves firsthand. And that's how the stories are spread and kept alive. Like I said, I'm going to be, again, now this is a little bit different. There are not many people that I found that I talked to who were eyewitnesses to the focus of these urban legends. Now, there's one in particular, and it'll be the Gray Man of South Carolina, of Pawleigh Island, South Carolina, which I'll be talking about. that there were witnesses to the Gray Man, that claimed to be eyewitnesses to the Gray Man when they told me the stories of the Gray Man. Uh, and the funny thing about urban legends are they don't change, especially the supernatural ones. They don't change much with the times. Sometimes they're usually only updated based on the news and history of the time that's happening around them, but the base story is still the same. Um, which to me, when I hear things like that, and the story hasn't changed that much over time, that these urban legends, of course, have to have a basis. And in fact, it's something like this must be happening for this many people to continue to be talking about it, or still being witness to it and still talking about it over the years. Um, and these are not bedtime stories. These are not cautionary tales. Um, Let me separate it now from that. Uh, but let's get on with the stories. Again, before the story begins, any of the stories begin, there is a drinking game that we play on every episode of What the Fuck Paranormal Chat. And that is every time you hear me say the phrase, that's a story for another day, that's a story for another time, or some iteration of that. Please take a drink of your adult beverage. If you are not one to drink an adult beverage, please take a sip of your drink of choice. If you do drink, by the end of tonight's episode, I'll guarantee that you will probably be drunk as fuck. So do not drink and drive. Okay, with that, let's begin. First story we want to talk about tonight. Pardon for the names, but the names are funny as fuck. I still think they're funny, but the stories are not funny. The stories are actually scary as shit. Is the Yazoo Witch of Yazoo City, Mississippi. Um, I spent a lot of time in Mississippi, and Yazoo City is not a city, not by the standards of what a city is, but it is considered a city in the Old South. It is large, it is sprawling, it does have its metropolitan areas, um, but mostly it's still a swamp town. I would call it that. Well, it's probably I haven't been to it, God, in decades. But at the time I was there, it was called a city, but it wasn't like New York City. It wasn't, a sprawling city like that. Yazoo City. But the Yazoo Witch, when I heard people talking about the Yazoo Witch, um, one of my favorite things to do when I would go to a new town is I would go to the local diners, the local eating establishments where all the locals would gather and eat at, and especially the old timers, the old men and the old women, where they would gather at. And they would just shoot the breeze and exchange stories, and they would come there and sometimes tell the same damn story every single day. Um, but I found that they loved having a fresh face for an audience. And I would always present myself as I would always introduce myself, and ask them if they wouldn't mind if I sat with them and listened to them. And most of the time, they didn't tell me to bugger off or anything. They would let me sit down and listen to them. Um, and this was one of the cases. Actually, this was the case for all the stories for tonight, to a greater or lesser degree. That we started talking about. They were talking about some local. God, I know my chats are morbid, especially when it comes to child deaths. But I always the more terrifying stories I ever and terrifying things and stories that I ever heard and encountered had to deal with children, either being menaced, terrorized, or just outright being killed. And there had been a little girl who had died in her sleep, there in town, well, in the city, a few days before that. And it was in the papers, and they were talking about the death. And one of the old ladies sitting there with the old man piped up and said it was probably the old witch, because they didn't have any explanation to why she died. They walked in, she was dead. She was, I believe, 8 or 9 years old, and they found her cold and dead on her bed the next morning after her parents put her to bed the night before, with no apparent signs of trauma or disease or damage done to her. She was just blue in the bed. Um, and later on, you found out that she had stopped breathing through something happened, and she had stopped breathing um, during the night, and she died in her sleep. Well, I know that's terrible to talk about, but I have to say that to explain why the old lady brought up the witch of Yazoo, the Yazoo Witch. And of course, me being the curious type, or what she was talking about. And some of the old men, they would go, "Oh, she's just full of shit. She doesn't, she doesn't know what she's talking about." And of course, she would give them the fuck you look and then turn to me and go and address me as her baby doll. And she proceeded to tell me about the Yazoo Witch. Um, the live chat count is broken tonight. I didn't know how many people were in the room. I'm hoping everybody's in the room. Hope everybody gets a chance to hear it. She started telling me about the Witch of Yazoo. Nobody knew where she came from, um, but everybody knew what she did. The Yazoo Witch would come into the house of children um, and steal their breath. She would appear at the edge of their beds. She would slide in as a shadow underneath their window when a window was closed. She would slide in underneath the window, and she would go to their bed, and she would steal their breath at night. Now, she didn't necessarily kill the child, but she would just steal their breath because she fed off of that life force she was taken from the kids, is from what I understood. Um, but to some kids that she took a particular liking to, she liked the taste of them. She would return night after night and continue to steal their breath, their essence out of their body every night, um, resulting in the death of the child sometimes, but not all the time. The child would wake up the next morning and complain, they couldn't breathe the next morning. It was like they were having an asthma attack at the breakfast table. They would go days not being able to breathe right. They'd be like they were winded, like they had run a marathon in their sleep. And they would continue, like I said, and sometimes the child would be fed upon so much that the child would die in their sleep. She would steal the child's last breath, and the child would die. Uh, on other occasions, the child would disappear. And I would ask him, "What do you mean by that?" Well, sometimes, especially for very naughty kids, kids that were bad, just mean kids, she would not only steal their breath, she would steal their very last breath that night, but she would take their skin and wear it. And she would wear it and travel around throughout the night looking like the child that she had killed and stolen the skin from. Looking like that child. People would report seeing the child running around the neighborhood or climbing in the windows of other houses, in other bedroom windows of other houses, seeing that child doing it. But in actuality, it was the Yazoo Witch wearing the skin of a bad child that she had killed earlier. Um, and she would make her nightly runs stealing the breath of the children. Of course, I find that utterly and completely fascinating. So I decided to, break out my old paranormal research and try to find out what could be doing that. You definitely don't want the Yazoo Witch babysitting. Nobody, again, knew where the Yazoo Witch came from, because I kept asking who was the Yazoo Witch. Nobody knew where the Yazoo Witch came from. Again, you have to remember this town slash city, Yazoo, Mississippi, um, was bordered by many swamps. And if anybody's ever been to the swamps of Louisiana and Mississippi, um, it's like being on another planet. Everything there is alive when you walk into one of those swamps. It goes from being a bright, sunny day, and as soon as you step into that swamp, it's dark. The whole mood and tone of everything changes. There is something preternatural about the swamps here in the United States. Um, Something dark about it. The energy in the swamps is always dark. Um, you don't expect to see sugar plum fairies dancing across the swamp water. Um, you get a sense of dread when you walk into these swamps. So I can imagine something like this Yazoo witch, this witch, which obviously wasn't human, but would look like a woman, but obviously wasn't human, that it came from the swamps. Um, that was my best guess with that. But a lot of people there in the city, and probably still to this date, they all had a story of the Yazoo witch. Either, again, seeing her wear the skin of a child she had killed, dancing around in the middle of the night, running up and down the streets, or climbing into other people's bedrooms. Other people saying they would wake up and they would see the neighbor's kid who ended up being dead or missing, which most of the cases, when she wore the skin of another child, is that child ended up being missing and never heard from again. That they would see at the edge of their bed, they would see this child, their neighbor's kid standing at the edge of their bed. And when they stood up, that kid was gone. Well, it was the Yazoo witch, of course, wearing the skin of that child. And then they find out the next day that the child's been missing. And of course, you don't want to say that, hey, I just saw little Tommy standing at the edge of my bed last night. Because if you say something like that, you're automatically gone to number one on the suspect list of making little Tommy disappear. And you're going to probably get arrested, especially in the South. You're going to get arrested really fast. And you're going to get convicted really fast. um, so I found again, if you ever experience a swamp, walking through it, boating through it, spending the night in it, and God, the stories I can tell you about that, but that's a story for another day. Shit, I can tell you about swamps that I've been in. Ugh. Could fill up volumes of lore. The stuff that I've collected from swamp people that live in the woods. Fascinating people. Um, I'll have to say that I have a tendency to believe in the Yazoo Witch. Now, I'm just saying, I do call bullshit on a lot of things that I hear and see until something, until I hear a note of truth about it, or I experience it myself, or in this case, being in this city slash town, uh, with people that I felt, they weren't overtly superstitious, but they believed with their heart and soul in this thing. And and as you've heard me say before on previous chats, that uh, belief creates reality in some cases, in a lot of cases actually. Um, that this thing came into reality, and it's probably still there, preying on children as we speak. But it does not, apparently doesn't move outside of that town. It stays there and does it. Um, Not to give people nightmares tonight. Just to put that out there. Alrighty. Then, ooh, God. I gotta pull this shit out of my ass to remember it all. Because I pulled 3 obscure stories that I thought you guys would like. And I thought the Yazoo Witch was fascinating. Oh. The second one that I thought was really cool. Um, which sounds like a movie, so you guys are going to really appreciate that. My horror buffs out there are going to appreciate this one. Um, I spent a lot of time in Texas. I did a lot of shit in Texas. There's probably a lot of counties that I'm not allowed to go back into. Yes, your humble host of Naked Bigfoot was not always a kind tourist when he would travel. Um, I was, I could be the consummate pain in the ass, especially when I wanted to know something, and I knew somebody knew something when they weren't sharing it, and I was going to go out of my way to find out the truth. whether it killed me or them. I was going to find out the truth. And in this case, it was, oh, fuck. Um, 1995 or 1996? Shit. I'm old, by the way, for those who don't know. I'm like really fucking old. Um, I was in Austin, Texas, of all places. And this is before Austin, Texas became the mecca for displaced assholes from other states. I wouldn't spend any time in Austin, Texas for any amount of money with what's going on out there now. But at the time, Austin, Texas was Austin, Texas. Uh, Wonderful city. Great at the time, great people to be around, honest people to be with, honest both in their soul and both in their ways. So I had a lot of fun there when I was there. But one story that I kept hearing about when I was out there was about, and you guys are going to appreciate this, my horror people, when I say this, and that's the Candy Lady. I know, here it comes, the Candyman, the Candyman movie, which, by the way, I love. I hate the remake they did of Candyman, but I love the original trilogy, the original with Tony Todd. It doesn't get any better, Candyman doesn't. And that's the ultimate urban legend, is the Candyman that you can watch. Example of an urban legend is the Candyman, which is the movie. But this story, um, in all sincerity, was, I believe, a hell of a lot more frightening than the Candyman. It was called the Candy Lady. Um, I know, it doesn't sound scary. It sounds derivative, but actually, the story of the Candy Lady predates the movie Candyman. Predates anything that Clive Barker could have pulled out of his asshole. As a matter of fact, when you hear this story, you might have think that Clive Barker ripped it off. Might have ripped off this story when he did Candyman about the Candy Lady. Because it's similar, but it's not similar. I mean, you're about to find out about that. Okay, the Candy Lady. Again, this involves children. And it involves, you have to assume it's the death of the children, but it involves the disappearance of children. And if anybody knows, especially in places like Arizona, New Mexico, Mississippi, especially in some of the more rural communities, child disappearances and are they're big. Children disappear all the fucking time in these states, never to be heard from again. Completely unsolved, back of the milk carton shit. It's absolutely terrifying. So it's not hard, and it's not a far reach to believe that something like the Candy Lady could exist. But I'm jumping ahead of the story. Because again, this is one that I truly believe in. This is a Candy Lady. Um, After hearing about it, what does the Candy Lady do? Um, the Candy La- Children would wake up, get out of bed, and on their windowsills they would find a piece of candy. And it was usually some candy that they really, really liked, but their parents never got them. And there was always a note beside the piece of candy. Now, they could wake up in the morning, they could wake up in the middle of the night. It would happen during the day, it would happen during the night as well. That this candy would appear with a note. But what did the note say? Um, the note would always say, um, "Come play with me." And when the child looked out the window, they would see in the distance what appeared to be a little old woman. Just, far enough away where you can't make out all the details, but it looks like a little grandmother out there. And was usually they would see little silhouettes of children playing around this little old lady. Now, if the child decided to climb out their window and take the candy lady up on her offer to come play with them, as the child went across the yard or into the woods or across the yard, away from their house, they would hear the sound of children laughing, echoing in the distance around the candy lady. And as they got closer, they would find little pieces. They'd find more pieces of candy, leading in a trail leading directly to where this little old grandmotherly lady was playing with these little shadow children that were playing around her. As they walked up to him, the candy lady seemed to move away. The candy lady and the silhouette of the children seemed to move further and further away, luring them farther and farther away from their home. Um, Eventually, they would meet. I would assume they would meet up with the candy lady to never be heard from again. They would be gone, and they would never find a body. The child was permanently gone, assumed dead, or as I assumed, that these small shadow children, which were dancing around the candy lady, were probably the spirits of the deceased children that were forever locked with her for eternity to continue to lure more children out um, to consume. Now, I did never found a child that would tell me that they had seen the candy lady, but I did meet a shit ton of adults of all ages of that had a story of some sort about the candy lady. And they were either they saw the candy lady through their window and refused to go out their window, or they had a friend who disappeared and they assumed it was the candy lady that took them. Um, when I heard the stories being told, of course, I want to find out, exactly what it is. So, of course, I would turn to my books of esoteric and forgotten lore, and I would, my big black book of bad things, which again I'm gonna probably talk about more in another chat, but not tonight. So that'll be a story for another day. Ooh, I said it again, didn't I? Everybody told, and I talked to about 30 different people, and they all told the same story. Um, that they had either witnessed the candy lady themselves, um, or they assumed that they had a friend in their neighborhood was taken by the candy lady. Uh, Now you have to think about this. There are other stories of things like this happening. Think of the tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who lured the rats away, but then when the people didn't pay him the money, he lured the children away, um, never to be seen or heard from again. You hear there's stories similar to this that or even the Greek siren that would lure people away. The Willow Wisps, both in old Europe and are seen out here with the foxfire wisps that we see out here in the United States that lure people away into the woods and you'll never hear from them again. That such things like this have been talked about, but very few times that they are talked about that they have a form like of a little old lady. Um, a grandmotherly lady that would, of course, a child would trust an older lady. Because what do old people like to do? They like to leave candy out. They like to reach into their purse and pull out a piece of hard candy, a piece of butterscotch, or some of that god awful Christmas candy, or little pieces of strawberry candy. They always seem to have some in the bottom of their purse when they meet a child that they want to give to the child. And what do the parents do? Is they go ahead and the parents always say, "Go ahead and take it." Um, so the parents are teaching their child to trust the trust always with candy. So if you were some sort of supernatural being that preyed on children, what better form to take than a little old lady that was handing out candy? Um, we're also told not to take candy from strangers, but that apparently doesn't apply to old ladies. And I would really, really want somebody to challenge me on that. Both grown when I grew, although my family being different, being from the mountains, we were told not to trust anybody who lived down below the mountains, who lived below the clouds. We were brought up differently. Okay, I was brought up a lot differently to mistrust, to not put a lot of trust in people right away until you learn more about them and their character, and then you could begin to trust them. That's a story for another day. My upbringing in the mountains. Alrighty. So, what better form to take than that of, again, of a little old lady, um, with these little shadow children dancing around them and playing with them, with candy, you know? Thank goodness, though, that, some kids are, there are two types of children. There are the children who are born with an innate survival sense that they're easily spooked and scared, and they may not say it out loud, but they think, "Oh fuck no," or "Nope, not going to get involved in that." And then you have the children who are just so fucking trusting of everything around them, and those are the kids that are lured away by things like the candy lady. Um, yeah, I absolutely found the candy lady absolutely fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Um, Alrighty, moving on. This is going to be the third one tonight. Um, this one might be a little bit longer, but this is actually does not involve children, by the way. Any scary children, or well, anything eating children or making children disappearing or skinning them and wearing their skin. This is something called the Gray Man of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I don't know how many people that are going to watch this or are on tonight who have ever spent any time in South Carolina. But South Carolina is an urban legend and supernatural hotbed. Um, you've got Bigfoot, you've got the Lizard Man, um, you've got all kinds of weird shit. You've got the Pig Man. Um, you name it. They have, God, so many tales of women in white, ghosts, Civil War ghosts, you name it. South Carolina is a veritable hotbed. They've got this thing called the River Runner too, which I'm not going to tell you all about tonight. I'll keep that as a story for another day. Um, the River Runner I found fascinating too, completely fascinating. But I'll talk about the River Runner in another episode, because that's the River Runner deserves to have its own story told. It is a local cryptid. The River Runner is down in South Carolina. That's something I had never heard of before, but had the opportunity to find out about. And I think I saw the motherfucker too when we were there. I better not stray too far into that, because I want to save that when I start talking about more legendary cryptids of the South, Southern cryptids. Because the South is filled with all kinds of strange and bizarre cryptid and like animals. And the River Runner's one of them, and it made me shit my pants when I thought I saw it. Um, and the people that I was with, they think they saw it too. They saw what I saw, and they believe they saw the River Runner, and it scared the ever living fuck out of them. Okay, the Gray Man of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I told you guys I do get off topic sometimes and stray away, but I call it my paranormal ADHD. When you've lived a long and bizarre life like I have, your 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 thoughts sometimes intermingle with other thoughts, and you just travel the path that's easiest, and shit just happens like that. But look for it. It'll be the River Runner when I tell that story about the River Runner. Hopefully sometime soon. Okay, the Grave Man of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. The gray man is actually not considered something dangerous. He is terrifying by the way he looks. Let me just describe the gray man. The gray man is, as it sounds, is a man that is dressed all in black. We're talking about he dressed in period colonial, well, post-colonial, um, pre-Civil War clothing, gentleman's clothing with a, but it's all black. Everything he's wearing is coal black, um, and his skin is a glowing gray color. Um, and he has black eyes. He has eyes, but they are coal black, with little pinpoints of. Sometimes people have seen little pinpoints of blue, sometimes little pinpoints of red in his eyes. And he is always found walking the beaches of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. For those who may or may not be aware of it, but every time South Carolina is famous for its storms. We're talking about hurricanes, major thunderstorms, and the such. Um, and over the history of South Carolina, it's been hit with some devastating hurricanes that have come through, that have killed so many people, and displaced so many people in South Carolina. Um, we always hear about the other states, like Mississippi, like Louisiana, um, in parts of Texas when a hurricane comes through and the flooding and loss of life. But please believe me, when a hurricane takes a shot at South Carolina, it fucks South Carolina up really, really bad. We just don't hear about it as much as we do um, some of the other states, which is a crying shame. We should all treat them equally, in my book. But this gray man, dressed all in black, period clothing, he walks and Pawleys Island is a small, and for those who know, off of a lot of southern states, coastal southern states, there are always plenty of islands that are inhabited by people in small communities. Pawleys Island is one of them. He walks the beaches of Pawleys Island, but only at certain times, and that's where we're going to get into it. The first sighting of the gray man was, I believe, back in the 1820s. Um, when they first started talking, started putting in the papers about hurricanes and huge storms that would come through and devastate it. And the gray man was seen walking on the beaches, and he approached a group of men and women and told them to leave the island. There's a storm coming, and it's dangerous, but you must leave now, or you're going to die. Um, he put the fear of God in these people when he told them that. He said what he had to say, and then he would turn away and he would continue walking down the shore of Pawleys Island. And the people, of course, being terrified, they left the island. They got on the first boat and they went back to the mainland. And they were struck by a hurricane, and a lot of people lost their lives. But this group of people that the gray man warned were not caught in the storm on the island, and they were not killed. That was the beginning of the stories of the gray man and the appearances of the gray man. After that, the gray man was spotted many, many times. Every time a large, dangerous storm was looming, the gray man would always appear along the shore, and he would always approach a person or a group of people, and warn them to leave the island, that they were in danger. If they stayed on that island, they personally were going to die. They were going to die in the storm. And he would turn around and walk away. Now, there was an instance where he walked up to a woman, and he appeared as her dead husband, as she told the local paper. He appeared as her dead husband and beseeched her to leave the island as quickly as possible, to take the children and leave the island as quickly as possible, because their house would be destroyed and her and the family would be killed. Believing it to be her husband, it terrified her, and she went home and gathered her children up. and left the island. And, when the storm came through, her house was one of the ones that was absolutely wiped off the island, like it never existed. So if she'd stayed there in the house, she would have died. But that was one of the few instances where the gray man actually appeared as someone that they recognized when he went, and nobody could quite explain why he appeared as her dead husband to come to her to warn her that, her death was coming in the form of a storm. Now, in recent times, in the last 30 years or so, the gray man has appeared multiple times um, to warn people about some of the larger hurricanes that would hit Pawleys Island. Um, and he, of course, would warn people. And it would never be the entire island. It would always be a group of people, or, 3, 4 people that he would run across, that he would walk up to and do that to. That he would walk up to them and say, "You need to leave." He would never touch them. People never felt inclined to touch him because the way they described him was in his presence. It was like the being in a, it's like being in a meat locker, that you had just stepped out of a very hot room into a meat locker. That when he approached you, that the temperature, the ambient temperature around them would literally drop 10 degrees, and they would get the chills. Um, and his voice was never gravelly or grave, but it was always sincere and serious. And he always spoke in a language he understood, which would be English. He did speak Spanish to some Cubans who were living on the island when he was warning them to leave. He would always speak to them in a language that they could understand. He would never be threatening whenever he would approach these people and talk to them. Um, he would always just deliver that warning and then leave. And most people that experienced him, I would ask him and say, "Well, did you leave?" Well, and they would look at me and say, "Well, obviously I'm alive, so I did leave." And I go, "Damn." I did not meet a single person who said that they were warned by the gray man, or that they had friends that were warned by the gray man, and that they did not take it seriously enough to where they would leave. And they did take it serious enough, and they did leave. Um, Everybody that would heed the warnings of the gray man, and enough people had heard about the gray man, is that the few privileged people who experienced him, they took him seriously. They took him absolutely seriously. And in doing so, they saved their lives, because they believed if they had stayed on the island and not paid attention to the warning, that they probably would not be alive the next day. After the storm passed, they would probably be dead from the storm. Um, what did I think it was when they were talking about it? You've always heard me talk about the way I categorize spirits, whether they're once human, being a ghost, um, non human, or inhuman. I honestly believe that the gray man uh, was actually a force of a spirit of nature, that it was non human. Well, unhuman, be more unhuman than non human. That it was actually a manifestation of the island itself. For anybody who's ever spent time on small islands, especially here in the South, um, the islands, you go to places on the islands where there's no people, but there's always life. The islands are alive. They have their own life. They breathe. They have their own pulse. Islands do. And I believe that the gray man is a manifestation of the island, and that it's trying to keep people safe. The people who live on it, it's trying to keep people safe. Um, Call it an elemental, call it what you will, but I believe it is the spirit of the island that is, pulling itself together to be able to save people, um, which shows a certain level of care uh, that it has for the people who live there. Because the locals on Pawleys Island, if you ever meet them, the locals there are some of the best people you've ever wanted to meet, the nicest people, and they treat that island with so much respect, keeping it clean, keeping it beautiful, keeping it natural. Um, and they insist that anybody who visits their island treat it the same way. Um, And I think that's the island's way of paying them back, to be honest with you. Um, Gosh, I really did ramble tonight, didn't I? Well, guys, there are so many wonderful wonderful and fascinating things in this world. Um, I'll leave you with a couple of quotes tonight before we sign off. Um, One of my favorite TV shows, which is not on anymore, which I miss greatly, is Farscape. For those who know about Farscape, it's a science fiction series, amazing series, beautiful series, wonderfully written series, way ahead of its time. But during one of the openings that they had, I think was in the third season, one of the openings, um, he's John Crichton, who's the main character. He's making a recording for the people of Earth, which is the opening. He's telling them to look up and see the wonders that I see. Um, Paraphrasing that, and I want to put that out for everybody else. What people ask me, why do I do this show? I do this show because I want people to go out and I want people to not just go out, but to experience the wonders that I have seen, the strange and unusual and beautiful and terrifying things that I've experienced in this world. Um, and I hope you don't have any terrifying experiences, but I hope in the course of your life you have some amazing experiences and amazing stories that you can share with your family and friends and to the world at some point. And with that, guys, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight to What the Fuck Chat with Mike the Naked Bigfoot. I am, of course, your humble host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. If you like what you saw, please smash the like button, leave a comment. It can be positive, negative. I do respond to criticism. I do try to make the show better uh, with criticism. I'm on Twitter, active on Twitter, Voodoo Man 3 on Twitter. If you wish to follow, if you follow me, I guarantee you a follow back. Um, Please take a look at my catalog of other lives that I have done. Um, there's bound to be something that you may like. Um, and I hope to see everybody on future episodes of What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Have a great night, everybody. Had a fun time. Thanks to everybody who came out tonight. I want to thank everybody also who is going to be watching this after the live ends. Thank you so much, guys. I love you. I appreciate you.